Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast, where we celebrate individuals and families, businesses, and organizations that seek out and promote the exploration, stewardship, conservation, access, and enjoyment of the outdoors. Our guest today is Robert Annis. Rob is a freelance outdoor journalist, travel writer, and gear reviewer. Now, Rob joined us last year on the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. Rob is joining us today to chat about one of his recent pieces, The Ultimate Guide to All 8 Midwest National Parks, which he wrote for Midwest Living. Of these 8 guides, Rob has his hand in 7 of those, and I'll tell you, those are vacations of a lifetime. So, Rob, it's great to have you back on the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast, and I'm just surprised to see you at home.
Hey, it's great to be back. I rarely ever get asked back to places, so I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. And you and I have had a couple conversations prior to when you were first on the podcast. I think it was back in August of last year. We had just come back from our national conference for the Outdoor Writers Association of America. I was in Casper. And I remember either during that conversation or maybe one of the conversations we had since then, you were going to Isle Royale National Park. And I just remember, oh my God, there's a place that I grew up near, relatively speaking, in Michigan and never got to. And now you get to go there. And so I'm curious, this piece that you did for Midwest Living, all 8 of these. Now I know you had your hand in 7 of those, but how does one, first off, begin to get an assignment like this? Do they just come to you? Do you pitch this idea? How does this come about?
Well, luckily, I'd worked with my editor there, Julia, quite a bit, and she's amazing, super talented. I still have no idea why she works with me, but I'm glad she does. And she knew that I'd visit quite a few national parks and travel extensively through the Midwest. So she asked me if I wanted to help out with this piece, and it worked out that I've been to all those parks and I had things to say. And it's funny that my actual favorite of all those national parks is probably Theodore Roosevelt National Park, the one that I didn't actually get to write about.
Okay.
But yeah, it was great. It's just such a wonderful thing to be able to introduce readers to these places that are practically in their backyards, but many people don't know about or much about at all.
Okay. Coming from Chicago, I was aware of Indiana Dunes National Park. I will say I've only I'm going to age myself. In the near 30 years of living in Chicago, I think I was there once.
Mm-hmm.
And that was because there's a highway, it's like Highway 41, I think, that takes you from Chicago over to Michigan City, Indiana. And the park is literally that south end of Lake Michigan. Oh, let's stop at the dunes and take a couple pictures. So that was I visited the park for 30 minutes and that was it. But I imagine there's so much more to do there. So thinking about this project in its entirety, did you need to go back and revisit? Did you have this work already collected? Because again, you're a huge fan of the Midwest and the travel and the parks. Had you had some of this material already, or did you have to go back and really revisit for the first time, so to speak?
Not really. I'm lucky that, with the exception of one park, which is Gateway Arch in St. Louis, I've been to all the parks fairly recently.
Okay.
So they're still somewhat fresh in my mind. Yeah, I was in Indiana Dunes quite a bit last year, as well as Isle Royale. Same thing with Badlands, Wind Cave, Theodore Roosevelt. So yeah, I've been quite a few of those places fairly recently. So I was able to write about them, hopefully fairly knowledgeably.
Okay. Now, here in the West, I live in Nevada, and I'm a member of some of these travel groups out here, and people talk about, oh, we're coming to Utah to see the Big Five, and they want to do the drive, however they decide to do it. I hope they have a lot of time because there's so much to see. With the case of the Midwest parks, so we have Badlands, Wind Caves, Cuyahoga, Gateway, Arch. By the way, when I moved from Chicago to Las Vegas, I spent a night in St. Louis, and I actually was in the park. I didn't realize I was in a national park. Who knew? Isle Royale, Theodore Roosevelt, and Voyageurs. Is this perhaps Isle Royale notwithstanding, is this an adventure that a family is going to take maybe over 2 or 3 weeks, or are they so far apart you really have to say, okay, this is one or two, we're going to get one of these in this year and we'll go to the next one the year after. And so until you cover all 8.
It would be difficult to cover all 8 in a couple of weeks, assuming you want to spend time in each one. So when I've done them in the past, usually I'll break them into different road trips. I've done Isle Royale and Voyageurs at the same time. I've done Wind Cave, Theodore Roosevelt, and Badlands at the same time. So yeah, I would pick a few of your favorites and go from there.
Okay. Now, I recall in our conversation, and I know the fact with Isle Royale, and I love how you coined it. You went to go visit the largest island on the largest island on the largest freshwater lake, which I thought was pretty cool. What was the goal behind, for example, Isle Royale? Because that you have to want to get there. Okay.
Oh yeah, because it's a 3-hour ferry ride from Copper
Yeah.
Harbor
Yeah.
to the island. And I've been out there like a few times, and it's such a beautiful, remote place, very quiet, very peaceful, and just like so much just natural beauty. But for the last time I went, which was a friend of mine, he mentioned that Isle Royale was the home to the largest island on the largest lake on the largest island on the largest lake in the world.
There you go.
And it sounded just ridiculous. But it sounded like something that would be kind of fun to do. So I decided to like do the most stupid adventure ever. And so I took the ferry to Isle Royale, then I paddled and hiked over the next few days to the island. And yeah, it was there was a lot of portages, a lot of kayaking, a lot of stuff that had I done like a little bit better research ahead of time,
Okay.
I would have been probably a little bit more prepared for. Like I trying to find where the trails were after paddling a lake, you would have to try to find the trail at the end of the lake, and those are not very well marked. So there was some difficulty involved, and it didn't help that instead of bringing normal hiking boots, because I was doing all these portages and all the paddling, I wore a pair of water shoes with a good tread on them, but they're not meant for long distance hiking. So after the first mile, I could just feel, like just my feet were taking like a huge beating, just like skin getting ripped away. And so that wasn't the most fun part. But yeah, eventually I made it to the island and did a quick celebratory shot of whiskey, and then I immediately had to turn around and get back to my campsite for the night. So
Oh God. Okay. Now, and as I listen to the story, I'm thinking to myself, Rob, what were you thinking? And I see where a little more preparation was like, what am I getting into? Because I mean, we're not talking flat terrain there. And when you talk about portaging a kayak, uh, that's not easy. Was it one of these collapsible kayaks?
exactly. Oru, it's an origami kayak. So I was able to fold it up into the size of pretty much like a school child's desktop. So it was still pretty big, but it was a lot more manageable than it would be otherwise.
Oh,
So at the end, I spoke to one of the rangers, and she told me it's like, well, most people use like an inflatable pack raft when they do that, which I kind of felt like an idiot. But the Oru did amazing, especially for that 9.5 mile paddle from Rock Harbor to my main campsite for the next few
okay.
days.
Now, I imagine the manufacturer, there was a story written for them, or
They were just included in the article that I wrote for Fodors.
okay.
And I would highly recommend everyone listening to this, if they're at all interested, read that story. I'm not good with words, so the story has a lot more details.
You're good with words when they're written on paper. Okay, I got you. So for with Fodors, I mean, this is a globally recognized brand. What was the reaction from their readership, their customers to that article? Did folks from halfway across the world reach out to you and say, "Wow, that was amazing. I want to do that, and let's talk about it." Or did they just, it's there, and you're
Mhm.
on to your next project?
Quite a few people reached out and commented, so I was very happy that the response was almost entirely positive.
Okay.
So people seem to enjoy it and get some laughs out of it, even though a few of them um, were wondering what I was thinking.
Yeah. Thinking about the series with the eight national parks, and I know Theodore Roosevelt has a special place in your heart. What was one or two other like aha moments for you when you're visiting these parks? Like, not only you're producing great words that go on paper, show up in an article, blog, a magazine, wherever they might end up, but I'm interested in like what really made your heart sing when you're there in the moment, saying, "This is pretty darn cool." I mean, and I have a glass of whiskey to enjoy it with.
Going to Badlands is just such a visually beautiful park. You've got all of the sandstone cliffs, and it's just like a naturally made sculpture garden. Tons of different colors, and then when sunset or sunrise, with the different light hitting the columns and the cliffs, it just brings out so many different colors and nuances that it's hard not to look at it and just be and not be completely wowed. I mean, because it's such an incredibly beautiful place.
Okay. Now, I'm curious too about these parks. Now, again, Isle Royale, I can sense that might be an exception. Are there times of the year when these parks are like, this is the time you got to go, or does each park kind of stand on its own? There's beauty and to embrace and take advantage of at any time of the year?
Well, Voyageurs is a great park for pretty much any time of year because you have late spring, summer, fall. It's a water park, and so you can rent a houseboat or do kayaking, or there's so much you can do exploring on the water, and so many places where you can only in the park where you can only access by water. And then in the wintertime, it's pretty much a winter lover's paradise where they've got snowmobile trails. You can go snowshoeing, and it's just such a beautiful place when you have freshly falling snow, and then you have the Northern Lights, which is Voyageurs might be the best national park in the country to see the Northern Lights.
As I was looking at and reading the article, and I saw Voyagers and I saw the Northern Lights, that literally, Rob, was what like sparked my interest, because the Northern Lights is like one of my bucket list activities,
Mhm.
and that's it's not the easiest place to get to, but that's doable to
Yeah.
go and figure out when the optimal northern light time of the year is and make a trek up there if you can do it.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough where I've gone out and seen the Northern Lights on several occasions. I've written about the Northern Lights for Lonely Planet, and I've traveled pretty much all across the North America and in a few places in Europe to see them. Just make sure if you go to bookend quite a bit of time just in case. Because the first time I ever tried to see the Northern Lights was with my wife, and we were in Iceland. When you naturally think, "Oh, Iceland, Northern Lights," but we were there for I think 3 or 4 nights, and it was overcast and cloudy every night, so we didn't see anything. And yeah, it was disappointing. And my wife has still never seen the Northern Lights, and I've seen them on quite a few occasions since then. And I think she hasn't said anything, but I'm pretty sure she holds a grudge.
I I know if I was your wife, I would be holding a grudge. It's like, okay, so she's going to go on the next northern adventure with you, I think. So I'm curious now. With one thing I'm learning from the podcast, and especially as I chat with folks who are more familiar with the states themselves, and and I have a shirt somewhere, I think it was from the Sierra Club, of all the national parks, like a subway grid, which I think
Mhm.
is pretty cool. And, but as you kind of explore more local, like like in your neck of the woods, you're in Indianapolis, so the Indiana Dunes is that's a couple hour drive. How do you begin to explore more local? So if you're in Indiana Dunes, you're in Indiana, or you're in one of the other national parks, how do you begin to explore and share with people like me what is more local that you can do if you can't get to one of those parks?
Oh, well, there's always places where you can explore and find natural beauty and adventure. I know national forests, for example, um, are incredible places where they've got great hiking, great scenery, but only a fraction of the visitors that you would get in a national park. A lot of the times they're just completely overlooked by people because they don't have that national park branding.
Right. So within the Midwest, is there like a top five, top 10 places like Rob Annis, freelance outdoor journalist, award-winning freelance outdoor journalist, been visiting all these national parks, but if you want to stay local, this is his top 10 list. Do you have a list like that that you're building, or a must sees?
Oh gosh, prepared? um, but off the top of my head, Chattahoochee State Park in Minnesota, incredibly beautiful place. It's right on Lake Superior, and it's Lake Superior or Lake Michigan, one of the Great Lakes. And it's got some gorgeous views of the coastline and the bluffs. And then you go into the interior and you have all these smaller lakes and waterfalls, and it's stunning. I Probably the closest place I have in our backyard is Hoosier National Forest, which is I'll go there for like an overnight trip, or even a long weekend. There's Brown County State Park, which is nearby, which is kind of different from most of Indiana's typical scenery because you actually have a lot of rolling hills, and it can be for someone like me who has been a cyclist for a while, it's great because you don't have hills like this in other parts of the state, but it can be kind of challenging if you're not aware that the elevation actually goes up a little bit down there.
I have to admit, I didn't know Indiana had a hill.
We've got one or two, not many,
Okay.
not many.
Have you ever been to Pictured Rocks, a national lakeshore on Lake Superior?
Yeah, Pictured Rocks is actually one of my favorite places, and I've been lucky enough to write about it a few times. And it's one of those places where um, you've got the you've got the cliffs of southern Utah rising out of the Great Lakes. You've got a bunch of spectacular hiking. It's a beautiful park and a lot of beach for people who want to do a hike and then sit on the beach and with their feet in the water for to kind of relax and while away the day.
Yeah. I used to go up to Grand Marais, which was the eastern edge of the Pictured Rocks, Labor Day weekend before a university would start. And I remember like it was yesterday. I was down on the beach and I love just the sound of the shore. And I'll record those anywhere there's water these
Yeah.
days and post it up on the social sites. But I remember laying down on a log, hearing the shore, and I'm looking up and I saw a shooting star and actually saw a satellite crossing the sky.
Oh
And
wow.
I thought, now that is pretty darn cool. But I haven't been back since I was really young back then when I went there, but I would love to go back because it was just such an amazing place. What are your go besides your work and like the article, the Midwest Living? You've got some nice links to resources. You did the work with the Fodors. Are there some go-to guides, especially around the Midwest, that you would send people to so that they can start to plan their Midwest vacation?
Well, Midwest Living is going to be a great resource. They have a lot of really talented writers who work for them and have put together a bunch of sample itineraries and places that people ought to see. Each of the states have their Department of Natural Resources. Their website would be a great place to start and find some more information.
Okay. Before this podcast episode, I did just recorded one with Chris Blankenship, who's the commissioner for the Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. And so, okay, I'm going to go down for our
Mhm,
OWAA conference in September. I'm taking 2 days before. It's going
mhm.
to take a day to get there from Las Vegas, 2 free days before, a free day after. And he was like listing one after another. Okay, this is a great thing. This is a great thing. And I'm like, wow, I'm going to be lugging my clothing and my cameras and left. It's exciting. And I think sometimes in our backyard, we take things for granted. And what I love about your work and what you're sharing is we should be exploring what is in our backyard, if only, even if it's an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours away. I mean, from Indianapolis to the dunes, I don't know, is it maybe 3 hours, 2.5 hours?
Yeah, give or
But
take.
but we should be taking advantage of that and get out of our comfort zone of our home or our condo. And I love that. And works like you're producing help to do just that. So I appreciate you taking the time again. What are you working on now, by the way?
Oh gosh, I've got quite a few things coming up. Next week, I leave for Puerto Rico for a little mini trip to kind of explore and poke my nose around. Then I'm flying directly from Puerto Rico to the Netherlands, doing a story on bike infrastructure. And then, yeah, I'll be heading out to the southeast to go to Shenandoah and New River Gorge parks again. I'll be heading out to Northern California to do a piece for Outside, going back up to Michigan and Wisconsin. Hopefully, I'll be getting out to Scotland a little later this year.
You
Yeah.
got a sucky life, by the way.
My wife is always pushing me out the door. So, yeah, I've got to find some place to go.
There you go. And I'm telling you, if we can ever find a way to combine words, that's your forte in podcasting. I think we could have a win-win scenario here. So
Hey, we'll figure it out.
we definitely ought to figure it out. Well, listen, Rob, I appreciate as always to chat with you, and I'm so glad you were willing to kind of take your time and join us today and share with us about this wonderful article, The Ultimate Guide to All 8 Midwest National Parks, and kind of revisit some of those stories from Isle Royale and the piece you wrote for Fodor's. And uh, I think growing up in Michigan for half my life, I owe it to myself to visit Isle Royale at least once.
Yeah,
So
you will not regret it.
I definitely, and I imagine maybe that's another conversation with you, or like when you go on adventures like this, I know you have the truck. If you have that luxury, that creates opportunity, but then you still have to prepare like your top 10 list of everything you have to bring with you.
Oh
Something
yeah.
like that.
Yeah, having a camper van definitely helps out. Like for the conference in September that we'll both be at, I'm planning to take a couple of weeks and just kind of meander my way down and back and kind of see what trouble I can get into.
I think that's a wonderful idea. I was sharing with Chris, the commissioner, that I lived in Montgomery for a year and never got down to the shores. I did get up to Muscle Shoals because I had a client up there, but it sounds like there's a lot to see and do in that state, and just and good food too. You cannot beat that Southern cooking. So,
Yeah.
well, listen, before we head out, if our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, where are the best places that we should send them?
They can go to my website, which is robertannis.com, and they'll find links to most of my stories for various magazines and websites. And then they can always follow me on Instagram at Rob Annis. And I typically will post photos and snapshots of wherever I am at the time.
Sounds like a plan. And we'll, of course, provide the backlinks on our show notes to your website, robertannis.com, and also to your Instagram. We've got also the backlink to the Midwest Living magazine article, and we'll also get a backlink to Fodor's as well, so people can find you. Listen, before we head out, I just want to be a little bit of a opportunist. If there's any photos, maybe 4 to 6 photos from these adventures that you'd like to share with us that we can put on our show notes, I would love to be able to share that with our listeners as well.
Yeah, of course.
Very good. Well, listen, again, I want to thank you for your time. I'm looking forward to continuing to read about your adventures, and I'm definitely looking forward to enjoying some adventures down in Gulf Shores with you. And hopefully, I'm sure there'll be a couple of glasses of whatever adult beverage gets raised, and look forward to breaking bread with you down there. So thank you again for your time.
Hey, thank you.
All right. Listen, stay on the line. We're going to do a quick close, and you and I can have a final chat.
Okay, great.
All right, folks, we have just been chatting with Robert Annis. Rob is the freelance outdoor journalist. Man, the adventures this guy gets to go on. If you can tell, there's a little envy in my voice here, but I'll deal with that. I'm a professional. Rob was gracious enough to come on today's call just to chat about one of his recent pieces of work that he co-created for Midwest Living. It was the ultimate guide to all 8 Midwest national parks. And we also touched on even if you get out of your backyard, go out an hour, 2 hours from your locale. There's a lot of local county and state parks to visit, trails, and it's really worth exploring. And as he had shared, go out to your state's Department of Natural Resources and Conservation. They often have a lot of maps and guides and places to help you plan your outdoor adventures in your neck of the woods. We also learned a little bit more about the experience at Isle Royale National Park, and Rob had a great article in Fodor's, and we will definitely share backlinks to that. As for us, definitely want you to visit our website, outdooradventureseries.com. You can find us on LinkedIn and Facebook on our Outdoor Adventure Series pages, and we are on all of the major podcasting directories. So, folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day, and we look forward to having you join us on another Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. Take care now.